good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from. This is Michael Cross with another episode of Unlocked Door Radio, where we try to deal with subjects of a challenging nature to get people to think outside the box and consider aspects of living today that maybe before they had never given much thought to. You know, next week is the election. Many of you have already voted, I hope. And a lot of you are planning on voting. I hope all of you are planning on voting. This is a very crucial election for a variety of reasons. And I'm going to go over some of the issues here and some of the concerns I have in regards to people voting their conscience. And so I may deal a little bit with somewhat of a Machiavellian approach. Now, last week, I dealt with the idea of what kind of arguments someone can use and psychological techniques someone can use in order to win a debate. Now, if you would go to my YouTube channel, just type in Michael Cross on YouTube, and you can see the video that I titled How to Win an Argument Anytime. And the thing is that ultimately politics in a democracy is all based on the idea of convincing people. Now, I'm sorry to say this. There's a quote I remember from George Bernard Shaw. That's right. And he said something to the effect that 2% of people think, 2% of people think they think, and the other 96% would, something to the effect that they'd rather die than to think an original thought. And the thing is, ultimately, even though it sounds a little arrogant that someone would make that kind of statement, but there's a lot of truth to it. And I don't think I would set it only at 2%. That's pretty dismal. That would mean only 1 in 50 people actually sits back and contemplates political issues and so forth, and the rest of them just kind of go with the flow. But I'm not going to paint a really optimistic picture either. I would say ultimately that maybe 10% of the people who call themselves conservatives, 10% of the people that call themselves liberals, and let's just keep it liberal conservative this time, but about 10% of each group actually strongly analyzes the issues, and then only a fraction of them actually get involved in the political process. Now, part of human nature, and call it what you wish, it might be part of our survival tendencies. We deal a lot with psychology here, and ultimately there's only a small percentage of people who really are the movers and shakers in a society. The vast majority are the moved and the shaken. They are the people who, in a democracy, still have the right to vote, have the ability to vote, and their influence is just as important as anyone else's, in theory. I know we've seen those kinds of reports dealing with corporate power and so forth. But the thing is that most of these people are swayed by good arguments, good presentations, and maybe emotions, mostly emotions actually, and ultimately, if there is an issue, maybe 1 or 2 critical issues. To liberals, it might be an issue such as abortion or gay marriage. To conservatives, it might be something like gun control, or, like I said, abortion, and maybe the gay marriage issue as well. Those are those single issues that really get someone to go one way or another. Very few people sit back and really analyze such things as the voter's pamphlet that's sent out to you, or go out there and really research. Ultimately, I think it's kind of ironic that the ones who do really research wind up, if they're more liberal, they wind up more in the Chomsky or Nader camp. So, for obvious reasons, they often turn against the traditional Democratic Party. But the same is true of the Republicans too. The ones that really research wind up kind of gravitating towards today's phenomena of libertarianism. And ultimately, though, no matter what, if in our system it's a winner-take-all. We're not a parliamentary system like Sweden or Russia or some of these other democracies. We're not a system in which 7% of the people vote for a party, and then therefore 7% of the seats in Parliament wind up going to that party. It could be argued that's a fairer system. So everyone gets a chance to have representation if they get over the 4 percentile in many countries. So it means 1 in 25 people might support, I don't know, just throw it out there. They might, let's call them a Sasquatch party or something, wanting to find out what's behind Sasquatch. Well, if 4% of the people vote for that, then they would have representation in the legislature. In our system in America, though, if people want to have a particular position or view or ideology represented, there's no way you're going to get 50% plus 1. Okay? People are too fragmented on those things. You're going to have to build coalitions just all coming under the same party, whether Democrat or Republican. So ultimately, environmentalists, people that are concerned with issues relating to abortion, keeping it legal, that sort of thing, they'll gravitate towards the Democrats. Issues like gay marriage, that also tends to cause people to, therefore, to gravitate towards the Democrats. Whereas you'll find in Europe, a lot of times your most right-wing parties ultimately have a lot of gay members. But, in America, of course, religious conservatives and so forth, they gravitate towards Republicans and so forth. I'm going to break it down in a few minutes, the various types of Republicans. But I'm going to say something kind of controversial to some of you, and that's going to be this. We really need to get a lot of the Democrats out of power. And I mainly look at Obama. All right. The thing is, he's been able to push a lot through or to obstruct a lot of things because he's got Harry Reid there. Basically, if we were to call Obama the Emperor from Star Wars, then Harry Reid would be his Sith apprentice. And so they have been able to work to obstruct a lot of issues that conservatives and libertarians too would find very important, and to ram a lot of things through. And I guess probably one of our biggest goals this next week should be to make sure that Harry Reid is no longer the Senate Majority Leader, through getting some of the Democrats that are vulnerable right now, that are running for Senate, and even some of the ones that aren't vulnerable, just making sure that people are informed and making sure the Democrats do not win a majority. And if they don't win a majority of the Senate seats, then Harry Reid will be out. I don't know if he would then become Senate Minority Leader, or he might step aside and have someone else far more charismatic. That wouldn't, take his place. It wouldn't really require a lot of charisma. I think if we're, I've seen potatoes that have more charisma than Harry Reid when it comes to him being on the TV and so forth. But hey, that's just him. He still is a very powerful individual and seems to know his politics very well. If you want him as Senate Majority Leader next week, then make sure that the Democrats get reelected. I'm saying that even if you have a situation where you have a rhino, Republican in name only, running against a liberal Democrat, that you should probably vote for the rhino. Now, I'm going to look at Oregon. And I promise I'll get to these subcategories of Republicans here in just a moment. I think you have more subcategories within the Republicans who tend to pull together to themselves and isolate themselves more than the Democrats do. Democrats have a lot of competing sub-interests as well, but they tend to unify at the end and vote for Democrats, even though, again, I mean, I don't see why a union leader would support the Democrats when it's been people, Clinton, for instance, Bill Clinton with NAFTA, and with I know Republicans support, a lot of Republicans support it too, but Bill Clinton really opened the doors to China. It really opened the doors to China. And because of that, a lot of jobs are gone. Okay, I don't know why union leaders would ultimately support Democrats under those circumstances, unless, of course, the Republicans have a hard time actually being able to connect to the importance of having a infrastructure at home, and that being more important to national security than having a lot of airplanes, multi-billion-dollar airplanes and warships that have been paid for by borrowing money from the Chinese. Okay, I think ultimately there needs to be a different type of political realism out there versus what we see today. But anyway, we'll get to that. The thing is, I just remember in Oregon, when I was involved in a lot of politics in Oregon back in the 1980s, Oregon at one time had pretty much a solid Republican senatorial and state office coalition of people. You often had a situation where you had a governor, an attorney general, other state offices, state treasurer. You had Bob Packwood and Mark Hatfield as the senators. And then something not really surprising, but something happened that really turned Oregon into a pure blue Democrat state, with the exception of Eastern Southern Oregon's district. And that is, you had a lot of Republican purists who, instead of working together with some of the less conservative Republicans, or just realizing that sometimes when you're in a battle, when you're in an army, sometimes you got to kind of take a few of the people you don't necessarily like to bump your numbers up, so that the people you do like will be able to represent you in Washington, D.C., for instance, when it comes to congressmen and senators and so forth. The Republicans always did have a minority of liberal Republicans. On the other hand, the Republicans were usually dominated during the 1980s by more conservative Republicans. But those conservatives needed the numbers to keep them in their majority position, or to propel them into a better position in the House and Senate. But what happened was really kind of a lot of infighting, a lot of Republicans kind of saying, well, we're not going to vote for you or support you because we don't like this or that, and then just not playing ball. And this ultimately led to a situation in which now, again, instead of having maybe some liberal Republicans in charge in Oregon, you now have Democrats, and very liberal Democrats, in charge in Oregon. So maybe there has to be some politics. Now, I'm not saying, I get angry at people like John McCain, people like that, who have pretty much, at least on a lot of these use of military issues and trying to get down on Russia and Syria and that sort of thing. I don't like John McCain. Okay, I really don't like him. But now, if I had a choice between voting for him and voting for a really hardcore liberal Democrat, if they were to run, I probably would have to vote for McCain. Again, just from a Machiavellian standpoint, because ultimately it would be better to have him at least pushing the party numbers up than to have a liberal Democrat in charge. So, that being said, I don't like it. I didn't like having sometimes to vote for Bob Packwood in Oregon. Now, if you'd have given me a Democrat that would have supported a few more, for instance, traditional values, I probably would have voted for the the Democrat. There were a couple races where I did vote. I can't even remember the guy's name. He was somewhat conservative Democrat on social issues, at least. And when he ran for state offices, I voted for him over the Republican. But the thing is, we ultimately, again, are in a winner-take-all situation, and we have to make sure that at times you do get Republicans in office that might not be exactly what you want. But hey, if you were in a situation where you had a choice between you're going to get stranded on a desert island, and one desert island has no woman and the other one has someone that, well, might not be the most pretty woman on earth, I think, at least for the guys, you would choose, the island that would be with the woman of any type, versus just being sitting there on your island with your coconuts on, and all alone. So ultimately, this is how politics works. Now, here's the thing, though, I think people have to remember about the Republican Party. It's made up of several different factions. Democrats, I'm not going to deal with because, you got environmentalists, you've got union Democrats, you've got the civil rights, you've got to a large degree, gay rights organizations, and these guys usually work very closely together. They cooperate, even though they have competing interests many times. And Republicans, on the other hand, they have one type of Republican that is very important, and that's the people who are more the social issue Republicans. Now, these, I will say, are mostly people that in the early 1980s, many of them would have been called Reagan Democrats. Now, a lot of them were blue-collar workers, all right? But I will have to say this, a lot of the economic policies supported by such people as Thatcher in England and Reagan in America were good in some respects, but many of them were not. The whole idea of opening up, getting rid of a lot of the trade restrictions and so forth that used to exist, and not really doing anything to step in and try to encourage businesses to stay in the United States. And, when it comes to England, Thatcher doing the same thing, pretty much gutted a lot of the Reagan Democrats. Okay, it created a situation where many of those factory workers that you think of, and think about what 1980 was like, when you used to drive through a lot of communities and you saw lots of, mostly men, some women, but you'd see mostly men carrying lunch pails and going to and from work. Okay? Parking lots in front of mills, parking lots in front of factories, filled with cars. Actually, most of the time, very nice cars and trucks. Now think about what those factories look like today. They're closed. Those jobs have gone over to China, Indonesia, Vietnam, so forth. Some of them have been automated. Okay? But nevertheless, many of those jobs have disappeared. Along with, I will add, the middle management people. So those guys that went out and got their MBAs and then wound up working for a corporation that maybe made shoes or made electronics or processed wood into paper and stuff like that. They lost their jobs too. Okay? The thing is that that particular group, though, is still pretty powerful in reference, at least a segment of them, we could break these down to all kinds of segments, but a very large part of them are still quite influential, but they usually tend to be social issue conservatives. They go to church or synagogue on Saturday, Sunday. They believe in the family very strongly. They believe in policies that help the family. They don't necessarily get turned on by economics. If you talk to them about Keynesian economics versus Austrian School of Economics or these kinds of things, they're going to kind of look at you like, what? Most of them aren't concerned with that. But if you talk to them about family, if you talk to them about people earning a living wage and so forth, they will understand what you're saying. Now, the thing is, these people, again, are the ones who will often vote on issues like, well, the marriage issues, abortion, before the internet pretty much made the argument obsolete, the pornography issue. I say obsolete because ultimately you wound up with feminists and younger women actually, they look at the stuff now as much as the guys do, so therefore it is no longer an issue people go out there and protest about because it's been so mainstream by the internet. But anyway, that's beside the point. The thing is, the conservative issues, mom, apple pie, and baseball on Sundays, and all those traditions, those Norman Rockwell Americana type traditions, though the people that really supported that, the segment of the voters that you could turn on with those kinds of themes, are those so-called Reagan Democrats or / social issue conservatives, people that during the 60s and 70s tended to vote Democrat, usually because they saw the Democrats as supporting the working man. And many of your more elderly people who you talk to and you say, hey, come on, maybe your grandparents or your parents or something, why do you vote for the Democrats? And they're like, well, my dad voted Democrat and I'm not voting for any GD Republican. Well, the thing is, ultimately, those are the people. The younger ones tended to kind of go, hey, wait a minute, the Democrats are supporting some pretty weird stuff here. And they started voting Republican. But you may be in one of those situations, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, they vote Democrat, you vote Republican. Anyway, the next group that's very important, opposite of those people, are the ones that are dealing with such things as economics. They tend to be a little bit more libertarian. They don't care so much about issues relating to traditional family values and so forth. In fact, I've seen studies that have shown that swingers, for instance, people that are into wife swapping and stuff like that, tend to come from fairly affluent neighborhoods. I don't have any stuff to back me up here, but I would speculate that many of them vote Republican, even though you might think, what, they're voting Republican? I mean, I have met some very interesting people that you find out that they're voting Republican. Okay, economics can get people to vote Republican, even though they may be more Democrat when it comes to their social issue stands. Okay, now many of the so-called rhinos, the Republicans who are up there who do vote with the Democrats on social issues, that's where they're coming from. Now, okay, so you have the people that vote for the lower taxes, less government, and so forth. That's a very important part. The small business people, that's a very important segment of the Republican Party. Again, there's a lot of overlap here, but these are the main areas. Then you have the people who are more the libertarian. Now, these are a subset of the economic Republicans, but they tend to go a little further. Their idea is they just don't want any government for the most part. They want minimal amount of regulation. They'll quote you John Locke and so forth about, and Adam Smith, and say we got to have less and less and less control over our lives. So this is a very important segment as well, but they tend to, well, they're small, but they're still very important because they often are quite intellectual, quite well versed in politics and so forth. I hate to say it, but I'd almost kind of represent those, like if you remember back in high school, the kid that sat in the corner, and then when the discussion took place, he'd raise his hand and bring up all kinds of facts and statistics. And everyone would be sitting there like, whoa, dude, what is he talking about? Well, those are the kind of people, okay? Probably very high IQ, very intelligent, very committed ideologically to this idea of limited government. And lastly, you've got the military types, got to keep America strong. And you know, the kind that would watch Team America. If you haven't watched Team America, you should. It's funny. But the ones that afterwards are singing the song that was in there, you know, America. Yeah, I'm not going to say the rest of it. It's, you know, some bad words there. But anyway, the thing is, that's an important segment as well. You know, patriotism and so forth. Very, very strong segment. They're not as statistically a lot of overlap, but statistically I would say they're smaller. They're bigger than the libertarians, smaller than the economic conservatives, and smaller than the social issue conservatives, but still an important part. Now, I just want to illustrate my point, because I know some people are going, what's this guy talking about? He wants me to not follow my values and so forth. Not the case whatsoever. Okay? What I am saying is this. If you elect a bunch of liberals who will then institute policies that will make it more difficult for you and other people to find jobs, or your customers to be working and coming in and buying stuff from you, isn't that something that actually affects the social issue people? Do you know what happens when the economy's bad? Exactly what's happening right now. The people that stop having kids and stop getting married are the people that are marginal, the ones who could lose their home or not even be able to buy a home. They're not the people who've really worked and established themselves, okay? Who are usually in their 40s and 50s and 60s by that time. They're not those people, but they're more like nowadays the millennials. Okay? You know, I've got sons that are millennial. I have students that are millennials. And I will tell you this much. Many of them are scared to get married. I mean, it's because of the economy. So, no matter what your social issue policies are in a country, if you don't have work, you're not going to get married, and you're not going to start bringing some babies into the world. Well, at least a lot less people will do that. A lot of people will just say, hey, you know, if they're religiously motivated, they know that, yes, you're supposed to get married and you're supposed to have kids. Even though a lot of preachers nowadays don't teach that because, I don't know, maybe they're afraid people will get mad at them. So they'll yell and scream about the gay people getting married or something like that. But if you point out that, yeah, but minister, you've been divorced twice and you're working on your third trophy wife, and, you know, that sort of thing. Or a situation in which they don't talk about the idea of people having, you know, that you should respect having larger families. Okay? You gotta remember, you see a family like the Druggers, you know, the ones that have, like, I don't know, what is it, 19, 20 kids or something like that down in Arkansas. It used to be that the ethics that they teach, you know, I've read articles about them, about each child a blessing and that sort of thing. That used to be mainstream Protestantism. Now it's considered, you know, fringe Protestantism. I don't know, did the Bible change somewhere? I'm not sure. I don't think it did. I mean, maybe there's some new editions out there, but I don't think it really did change. So, you know, when people, you know, but when we consider the fact, though, that not everyone is as motivated as, well, that's the people that would just say, you know what, I have to work at whatever, I'll do it, try to feed my family best I can, but, you know, God said, you know, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. If the economy, though, is bad, a lot of the people who would normally get married and have families are not doing it. And so how is that going to help? Well, I support the family. I support marriage. I support these things. If your taxes are high, your economy's faltering, and everything's falling apart, you're going to see less people having families. And that's exactly, like I said, that's exactly what's happening right now. Birth rate amongst people, birth rate's really low. I mean, it doesn't really lower that much for the very, very poor because they have, you know, government assistance that will help them out, whether that be Section 8 housing, food stamps, things like that, okay? It's not as big of opportunity cost. It's not as scary in that sense, then, if you have faith the government's going to be there, to have children. The very rich, I don't think their birth rate's really affected that much. They don't care. They're making money like crazy right now. But it's the middle class that's really, really getting pinched. And so I would say, it's better to have a few extra senators that, yeah, you can joke about them being rhinos and that sort of thing, but it's better to have them in there and having an economic policy that will be more in line with helping people find work than something that, Obama and what was it, Hillary Clinton, no corporations give people jobs. And what is that all about? I mean, has she ever worked for any kind of small business or corporation? I don't know. I only know her working for, the government. I don't know though. Maybe she has had private. I just have to say, to say that corporations don't create jobs and got Obama out there, you didn't build this, and that sort of thing. I mean, that's ridiculous. Okay, that's ridiculous. But you know what? These kind of people have to lose power. And if that means you sometimes do have to put someone in that's a little bit more liberal, if you have no other choice. Okay, if your guy or girl didn't make it in the primaries, then yes, vote for the person who's some people say lesser of evils. Well, if you gave me a choice between living in Saudi Arabia and living in Iran, I would be heading to Iran in a microsecond. Okay? I would not want to live under the systems of either one. But at least, if you compare the two, Iran is not that bad of a place compared to Saudi Arabia. But again, what do you got to do? Say, well, I don't want to go to either one. Jump out of the airplane without a parachute if that was your choice? No. You would have to choose one over the other. So it's kind of the same thing when it comes to American politics. Now, the thing I would also say is for the military group when it comes to economics and so forth. Well, actually, the military side should really be concerned about both the social issue people and the economic issue people. Okay, because if people aren't having families because they don't feel like they can afford it, especially in the middle class, who's going to serve in the military in the future? And when you don't have enough money to pay for the military, what's that going to do? Okay? The thing is, you need to have a strong economy in order to have this strong military. And right now, our economy is a joke. It's not really real. Okay? It's not real when you have to pay money that is borrowed to keep the thing going. And I'm not talking about a little bit of money here or there, but a lot of money. How many trillions of dollars does China have, in their reserves because of their trade surpluses with the United States? Yeah, there's nothing. I just have to say this though. If America ever did wind up in some sort of confrontation militarily, a lot of people think, well, what would it be? China and Russia, versus NATO and the United States? Let me ask you a question. Who makes all the components that go into our military hardware? Now, if we don't have those components and we got into some sort of ruckus somewhere and we needed to buy those components, but China said, not going to sell, what then? That's just something I want you to think about, because I know a lot of people out there say, yeah, America, number one, we're number one, no one can beat us. Well, you know what? There are so many areas that America is vulnerable in right now. Think about what I said at the very beginning. Those factories where people went with their lunch pails and had work, good paying jobs. I'm not talking about these assembly lines now, which are better than China's, but a lot of them aren't those kinds of jobs that you could support a family with. Okay, you might be getting paid $10 or $15 an hour to do factory work that, I'm not talking about inflation. I'm saying that I had some jobs. I had a job in a mill that I was making, depending on what day I worked. It was around $12 to $15 an hour. I had it part-time when I was in college. Those jobs, the same job I had at that mill in Oregon, now go, and this was in the 80s, early 80s that I had that job. They now pay about that much. I looked at some employment statistics. Some employment, what do you call those, ads or whatever that you can access through the employment agencies and stuff. And the job I did is about the same amount of money because there's less of those jobs. So therefore, the competition for the jobs is in an increase. So the wages decrease. To be honest, I'd rather be a waiter because you know what? Whenever you work in a restaurant and you make tips, you'll be in much better position than going and doing back-breaking. I'll tell you, it was back-breaking work. Putting wood into a drying system. And do that for 8 hours. Okay, that was a lot of exercise. I could eat 3 calzones in a night before going to work and still be losing weight. Okay, so the thing is that we need those kinds of jobs still, and when they're all closed down and everyone thinks, yeah, people can get jobs, they'll convert it to a microbrewery. Okay, well, you know what? Microbreweries are not going to put everybody to work and give them the wages that you want. So this all is interconnected. Military, economics, libertarianism when it comes to economic purity, and the social issues. They're all interconnected. And that is why we need to make sure that people are electing people that will oppose Obama. And to be honest, I would love it if the Republicans would win so much in the House next week that they had enough power to replace Bonnier. Okay? Get someone in there that has the courage, like a Republican Tip O'Neill, or at least a Newt Gingrich, who would not be scared of standing up to Obama. Okay, not just sit there and whimper or whatever. I mean, we need to have more people who have a real strong, fighting spirit. So hopefully, enough Republicans of that, the more conservative, libertarian, Rand Paul style Republicans will get elected, so that even if you got a few liberals in there, they won't dominate, and the Rand Paul types will. Okay, but even then, if you have in your own district, you have to vote for a liberal liberal Republican. Then it's better if that person gets in. The Republican gets in, because that'll give more power to the Republicans in general, and it will bolster the people who are more conservative. Now, the other issues I'd like to touch on that illustrate the importance of getting out there and voting is the idea that, just like, again, go to my YouTube station, Michael Cross, and look up what I said about, the last week's I put up the one about dealing with how to win arguments anytime. Now, we need to be able to talk the people's language. All right, we need to be able to speak their language when it comes to relating to them. And a lot of times, I think we need to start using the emotions. The Democrats do it all the time. I saw this poster, this picture on a debate forum on Facebook. It has a picture of an old lady in one of those states that has voter ID. and it says, oh, she's like 100 years old. She's 100 years old, and whatever. She's voted ever since before World War II, and because of voter ID, she doesn't have what she needs to go in and vote. Now, first of all, I think those kinds of things are bogus. There's other kinds of ID. If you don't drive a car, there's other ways to get identification that proves who you are and where you live. Okay, there's plenty of identification. But those kinds of appeals are effective. It's just like in the 2012 election, the Democrats, or at least liberals, were running these things, not saying that Mitt Romney was going to take your birth control away, but implying it. And you show the young woman like, well, what? I'm going to not be able to have birth control or whatever. And people remember that. It sticks in their minds. Remember Coney 2012, and all the people were like, whoa, look what's going on down there. And that fizzled out. But then again, they had the Ukrainian thing where some girls on there, when they were debating on the whole government thing before the coup took place, the government was overthrown, pretty much by the West, I might add. And a lot of people, I couldn't fathom. I was getting so many forwards on my Facebook of this girl who was talking about wanting freedom and all this kind of stuff. That's emotion. Okay? All of these things, the Coney thing, all that stuff's emotion. Usually, the Democrats are better at using emotion. Usually. We've got to be able to speak to people. We've got to be able to get them to start questioning. And some of the things you can do is just, if you find a good article, it's kind of interesting. I was talking to two different people today. One of them, an old friend, I hadn't seen for a while. Well, we were talking via Skype. And, he voted for Obama in 2008. He's really angry now. He's voting against anyone who supported Obama in 2012. He just said, I'm voting against every one of them. He gets the angriest voters are the ones that actually voted for Obama and feel betrayed. But I talked to another person. Now she's kind of a idealistic type person, and started talking to her about some of these economic things. The things where why is the government giving all these weapons, high-tech military weapons to all these police departments? School districts with tanks, and things like that. And I kind of threw in the thing about, I think it's because they expect that there's going to be an economic collapse. And maybe one of the things could be that this is what's going on. And I said, I had evidence, when I read these things that, former CIA analysts and so forth will say about these issues. And she looked at me like I was basically saying, hey, Barack Obama is actually a turtle or something, and he's disguised as a person. The thing is, I only got to speak with her for a few minutes, but I have to find a way then that I can connect. I did find one issue that she, it made her start thinking. I'll just leave it at that. But usually those people get their news from mainstream media. Maybe what's good to do is just share an article with someone. I don't mean this necessarily posting something on Facebook, but actually send them an article saying, what do you think about this? Because most of the time, I've seen the way some people go through their Facebook. They just fly through it. They don't see it. Okay, they don't actually see the actual post very much, unless there's like some girl in a thong bikini or something, or whatever catches their attention. But ultimately, it's more effective if you know someone and one of their one of their issues is, let's say they're really religious, but they're like, well, I don't know why people are so down on Obama. Send them an article, something that you think, wow, why is Obama doing this? It seems very against traditional religious groups. Send them an article and just say, and don't be threatening though. When you throw something in someone's face and say, hey, look at this, I told you so, you turn them off. Don't do that. Actually, just send it to them and say, hey, have you read this? This is one of the reasons why I really have some problems now with President Obama. Even using the word president. If the person's someone that likes Obama, make sure to make them feel good. Okay, I know this sounds like, well, what? I'm not gonna pander to someone. No, but what you do is you're kind of saying, hey, I really respect this person, but this has got me concerned. So that lowers their defenses. Okay, that's not a negative thing to say. They lower their defenses, shields down, to use, like, if you're talking about Battlestar Galactica or Star Trek, shields go down, and they'll take a look at the article and go, wow, I didn't know that. This is strange. I didn't see about this on the news, but and then they'll start questioning. That's how you do it. You don't get in someone's face and just, you're so stupid. That just sets up, when people argue, the frontal lobes of the brain shut down. It's a proven fact. So blood flow decreases in those areas and increases in the fight or flight areas of the brain. So if you want to cause someone to really think and consider and to ponder and come your way, just kind of approach them non-threatening. It's just like if you're going to go, if you're a guy and you're going to ask a girl, you're interested in a girl, you don't go up to her and say, hey, you look good, let's get married. That's not what you say. You play the game. And the same is true of politics, okay? There's nothing wrong with it. Be nice. You'll get a lot more accomplished. Now, if you're debating someone, use humor. That's really good. But anyway, just try it. Try to convert a few more people here and there. Most of us live in shells. We have our little circle of friends and associates, and our friends and associates all seem to be seeing the same things and writing the same. It's just like on Facebook, they narrow it down. You only see the post of the people that you most interact with, so you get clusters. Sometimes go through some of the friends you haven't heard of for so long, thinking, wow, I guess they don't use Facebook, and look at their Facebook pages. You'll find that they have lots of posts they've made, but you didn't see them because they're filtered down to the people that you most connect with. But the thing is, if we keep seeing our friends have this post and we put in something, we're like, whoa, people are all waking up. Well, actually, maybe it's only 15 people on your friends list who have the same opinions, and they're just sharing it amongst each other. Maybe reach out to those other 200 people that are on your friends list. Try to bring them over. That's the way to do it. But anyway, you're not going to do it between now and the election day, maybe, but, give it a try. Now, some of the other issues, some of the issues that's really got the Democrats scared, it seems, is immigration. The thing, I think a lot of people have the perception that there is no immigration policy. It's kind of like last one in, turn the lights on, or turn on whatever, shut the door when you come in. And this is something that is really, I've heard it's really got a lot of black voters angry, that they feel that there's, in a time when there's not that many jobs out there, that suddenly they're going to be competing with other people coming in from other countries. But this is an issue that may actually swing a lot of contests, especially in the Northeast, where all of a sudden communities are, all these communities are suddenly winding up like, whoa, wow, what? We're getting all these new people in our schools. I think some of the funny ones about students enrolling, in like 8th grade who have gray hair and mustaches, because they're just, I'll just go to school, and they're not really having to prove their age. I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, I've read about that, but this has caused a lot of people concern. But one issue that's really got people though is I'm not going to spend too much time on the immigration issue, but Ebola. Now, Ebola has really got people questioning. When you have a president who stands up there and says, "Don't worry, our policies will prevent this," and they put someone in as an Ebola czar that is not even a doctor. Come on. A lot of people who even the ones that just watch the nightly news are going, "What's going on?" I mean, this is really, this is one of the, I don't know if there's ever been a disease that's actually really scared people about the policies of the president. They're starting to wonder, what are the policies? What's going on here? And so you're even getting a lot of people on the far left who are like, wait, now, just a second here. Maybe they're medical type people, and they're going, this is not the way to contain an epidemic. This is if you've got something that's actually growing in one geographical spot in the world, it's usually not a good idea to start bringing people, having a lot of travel from that area of the world. And then I saw something on Drudge, some headline about that Obama's considering bringing people that are not U.S. citizens into the country to treat. Oh, I'm glad we have so much money. You know how much money it costs to treat a person with Ebola? Now, of course, some people are like shutting off, going, "Wait a minute, you can't put money, a price tag on human health." Well, actually, yeah, you can to a certain degree when you realize that if you suddenly bring in lots of people who might actually, even if they don't spread the disease to other people, that it's going to cost a fortune for the medical community to deal with, and it's going to use up a lot of our resources. Well, where do we get those resources? That's like these people who say, "Yeah, let's have another war. Let's give $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Let's go blow up Gaddafi and that sort of thing." And you don't realize, well, where's that money going to come from? It's borrowed. Well, our medical establishment, can we really afford that? I mean, we have a duty to our own citizens, yes, absolutely. But even then, we have to have, we should shut off travel to the United States, from these areas. I mean, Australia's done it. Nigeria and a lot of other African countries have done it. This has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with any of those kinds of issues. This is a public health issue. Okay? A lot of people just don't want to be bleeding, from every orifice of their body. They don't want that to happen to their families. And even though you may show someone that's been cured, go through how much it took to cure them. This is not something that's just like, oh, I got to go to the hospital and just lay in bed and have some antibiotics pumped into me. No, you look it up. Okay? It's a lot more intense. And it wouldn't take that many people being infected to really, really severely impact the medical fields in the United States. Now, in the remaining time, though, I just want to say this thing here. I was reading an article recently. I've known it a long time, but it's hitting more mainstream press. Someone was writing that some journalist was writing that Obama is the most dangerous president to media freedom. There you go. Look at that as an issue. I'd venture to say a huge segment of your left-leaning friends actually, when it comes right down to it, they really do believe in press freedom. They really do. You may think that's wrong, but there are a lot of liberals out there that believe in press freedom more than some of the conservatives out there that are like, well, it's national security. People have to give up some of their rights. Fortunately, those are kind of the loony people on the right, but unfortunately they get a lot of press time. The thing is, though, those are issues, whether it be Ebola or immigration maybe, or the thing about the press freedoms, that you should actually emphasize with your liberal friends. Ask, look up that article, Obama. Just use these keywords in Google. Obama, dangerous media freedom. Find the article. It's reprinted on a whole bunch of sources. Then, different titles, but it's still the same. And then just send it to your friends saying, I was just wondering, this is a little scary, don't you think? Non-threatening. You're asking them, and you're relating to them. And the more people see this, now they're not going to see this on the nightly news, okay? The nightly news, it's a propaganda machine for the government. I'm not saying any particular nightly news. I mean, network news, 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, click the channel. I mean, face it. You find some truth in there, yeah, but you have to really sift through. So it's actually, honestly, not even worth watching those nightly news shows. I mean, you got your internet, search for stuff. I mean, that's the way to do it. You'll get first-hand information really quickly, and you start learning that, the American press is not so good. British press, it's a lot better. On press freedom, love The Guardian. I know it's left-wing, but on press freedom, the work that's been done by Glenn Greenwald and some of those guys, fantastic. So, but anyway, those are the kind of issues you can just say, hey, do you really agree with this? And a lot of times I've exposed people, further to the left of these things, and they look at it and they're going, oh my gosh, yeah, this is really, really scary. And when you start getting those people say this is scary, then you're getting them to question. Okay? Those are the issues you can use as wedge issues. But it is important to do this. This can't be, if we get rid of a bunch of the liberals, and it really severely threatens the Obama agenda in the next 2 years, that's absolutely wonderful. But it's not time just to sit back and go, did it. This should be seen as an educational process. If you want to preserve your gun rights, if you want to preserve your First Amendment rights, if you do not want to see the kind of system that seems to be evolving, okay, when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to spying, domestic spying, and that sort of thing, then turn it into an educational opportunity to try converting more people over. Okay, we're out of time, but I will have to say this. Don't forget to vote. If you have friends and relatives who agree with you on various issues, don't let them sit at home. Make sure to call them and say, hey, you want to go down and vote? If you haven't already gotten the forms, make sure every one of you gets out that's listening to this, and make sure you get all the people you know out there who agree with you and get them to vote as well. Anyway, that concludes our show, and I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV.
In a Quinnipiac University national poll, a plurality of voters say President Barack Obama is the worst president since World War II. 33% of voters think the current president is the worst since 1945.
For more news, visit pigminenews.com.